Magic players are complaining about mulligans again. And it's not without fault, like this tweet from Kanister MTG talking about how mulling to 5 feels really bad. And many TCGs have solved this in different ways. But in Magic, it's more so a feature. It's a skill to your deck building, to flood out or to not draw any lands. It's an important part of the game in terms of understanding the decisions you have to make at a certain time with the resources that you have and how you can then manipulate that to win the game. And different mulligans have progressed throughout the years to change the viability of different archetypes. As our mulligans have improved, we've found our sideboard pieces better. Combos have gone off easier. And I wanted to highlight that in this video, talk about how I don't know if there are some good solutions to the mulligan right now and whether or not we need to change it. And with one of my favorite decks in Magic, I'm hoping to highlight how the different mulligan system has changed that deck specifically, or would have, and now lead to a different result. Like where we're at right now with combo decks, with sideboarding, with fair strategies, and what a solution, quote unquote, to the mull to 5 problem might be. As mentioned, this is the tweet itself. Mulliganing hurts in Magic, especially when you go to 5 versus 7. 5 is just so few cards, no room for lands and spells. I've been thinking of ways to mitigate that. What if we start with the hand size of 9? Mulliganing twice would make for a proportionally smaller difference. Now, I don't look. I applaud thinking about changing this, because this is actually really important. The idea of how 5 feels worse than 7, and it actually did at one point lead to one of our fundamental changes in mulliganing. So, okay, there is a basis for this. I don't know if this solution is really it, and I want to kind of highlight this. So I made a little Google Doc on mulligans. Okay, we're gonna highlight the history of mulligans with Pauper Cycle Storm. Now, a big caveat here, this iteration of Cycle Storm was not around during the original mulligan rules. So I'm just applying the rules to this deck list and how it would change. There's also a biased view of this, because as you're gonna learn, mulligans have improved in such a way not only to improve consistency and take away more non-games from the player, remove that entirely, but also it's improved in that sense combo decks, which is why I wanted to use combo decks specifically for this situation. How you can now see how the viability, the playability, and the amount of options you have per hand have increased just in the name of decreasing non-games. So one land spy, for those of you that don't know, it's not Cycle Storm, it's just kind of categorized under that in Pauper. You use Balustrade Spy, 1 land in deck, which is why it's called 1 land spy. You put the land into play, and then you use Balustrade Spy or another option to mill out your whole deck. And once you mill out your whole deck, there's a way to win. That's all I'll say. Okay, for many of you more in franchise players, you understand it's viciously easy to win the game once you mill yourself out. It's very easy if you build it right. So that's the point. Now, I want to look at some opening hands. So the first original mulligan, according to MTG Wiki, was all lands or no hands. So if you manage to open a hand with no lands, right? Which is kind of funny in 1 land spy, you are allowed to mulligan for free once. You draw your 7 all over again. You reveal your hand. You have to reveal it. That's the thing. So now if you're going first, you have to reveal your hand, a no land hand, and show your opponent what you're doing, then mulligan. So there's a lot of information that was provided. And again, in 1 land spy, it's kind of funny because of the chances of you're pretty much mulliganing every time, because the chances of you drawing that land, you might as well. The mulligan is always free. In Pauper 1 land spy, this would be absolutely busted specifically for this deck, which is why I thought it was a funny example. You would always mulligan if you didn't have the land. If you get the land in hand, that's kind of what you're looking for. This hand in general, not that keepable, to be honest. In a regular mulligan situation, Dread Return is a card that you want to flash back. You actually want this in your graveyard, so you want to mill this over. You have a Dregscape Zombie in here, so you have 2 actually. So you have a bunch of dead cards. You have waste and wake mana, but you have no way to mill yourself, and you have no way to get a land. So in general, this is not a keep for that sake. Then we went to the Paris mulligan, right? Now the Paris mulligan is you draw 1 less card per mulligan. So you mulligan once, you draw 6 cards. You mulligan twice, you draw 5 cards, right? So you take that 7 and you subtract by the number of times you mulligan. So let's say this is your first hand, right? So Lotus Petal, Tinderwall, Dregscape, Dark Ritual, Songs of the Damned, Dread Return, Zombie, right? So this is the same hand as here. Now, again, as I've highlighted, not a keepable hand. So you mulligan once and you have 1 less card in hand. So now this hand actually pretty decent, right? Like I would keep this hand even without the information of the 7th, right? Because all you need is a way to get your land and you have the win, right? You have Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, that's 5 mana, right? Then you play Balustrade Spy to mill yourself. You have 1 mana left over. You milled your whole deck. You Songs of the Damned. So pretty much with just these 5 cards, if you have a way to get to one of the Lord of the Rings land cyclers, Generous Ant or the Troll of Khazad-dûm, or heck, even just get the land or a land grant, you pretty much just win the game off this other Lotus Petal, right? So fantastic hand. I would always keep this, right? Great hand off the Paris Mulligan. So again, a situation where you now have less information, but still highlighting the fact that in a combo deck, you have ways to win, but you're missing some information, right? So this is an extreme case. Now, if you go to the Vancouver Mulligan, it's in addition to the Paris, but now you scry one. So you still draw 1 less per, but you scry 1. Now, what you do is this is your first hand, this is your second hand, same situation, but now you get to scry the land to the top. So pretty much now you in your mind know that you get to win the game. Next turn, you get to win the game. On your first turn, second turn, whatever it is, you automatically win the game. And so now you're thinking about things like, okay, in Pauper, you have cards like Weather the Storm that draw a lot of cards. So then you're thinking, okay, I'm going to win the game next turn. I need to set myself up. You can do a small thing like play out your Lotus Petals on that turn. So you're on the play, you scry to the top, you play out your Lotus Petals. Next turn, you draw the land and then you go off from there. Maybe your opponent has a way to get into the Weather the Storm. It's always something you want to think about, right? So there's like small things like that. Regardless though, it's a situation where you have a multitude and you're able to scry the land to the top and win the game. Great, right? And obviously this could be any other card. I'm using an extreme situation to highlight this and go through this very quickly, but this could obviously be like another dead card. You can mulligan that to the bottom to increase your chance of finding something else. This isn't a deck that shuffles really that often. If it does shuffle, it's probably looking to win kind of soon after that. Like you probably found the land and you're just trying to develop mana. But anyway, Haunted Mire at the top. Now before we get to the London Mulligan example below, it was announced in 2019, and the kind of the big thing around this was that they don't actually mention it here, but this Mulligan rule was actually designed because Luis Scott Vargas in the finals of a Pro Tour actually lost. I believe he lost because he mulled to like 5. Like the game or like 4, the game was a non-game. And that's the thing. They wanted to make sure games on viewership, games on coverage didn't amass to this, right? You can see how money talks when it comes to the viewership of what people are watching. As long as you can make that a concerted, curated experience, which is why you have channels like the Command Zone, Game Nights, talk about how they've curated their decks in such a way to increase games, to draw to hands that are relatively keepable. They want to make sure that games aren't non-games. And so these are the type of curated experiences that you get online, even in random experiences. So with that LSV game ultimately resulting in a bit of a non-game where not much really happened, you could argue that the recent Eternal Weekend result was like that. You had kind of both decks in situations where in game 1 the ultimate winner of the deck won like off of turn 2. The second game there was a collector oof paid, and then the ultimate winner couldn't beat the collector oof because they're playing an artifact combo deck, and then after that it was a multi 4. Notably, it was a multi 4 that the winner was able to claw back from. So it's all possible, but especially in that combo deck, I wanted to highlight that example because it was a multi 4 in a combo deck in a high power format, right? So they were able to curate a hand of 4 that they felt they were able to then win the game from because of a downstream effect of Luis Scott Vargas mulliganing to 5 and ultimately having a non-game. Because what happens is like you go down to 5 cards first, right? So you mull twice, you go to 5 cards, and then you scry 1. So you could have a crap 5, look at the top card. The top card means nothing to you. It could just be a dead card. And then you're in the same situation. You just take a dead card and put it at the bottom. You still don't know what the top card is. Yeah, you took away 1 dead draw, but then you could still have more dead draws. Therein lies the idea of randomness, right? So because of that situation, we had the London Mulligan change. And with the London Mulligan change, what happens is you put cards back equal to the amount of times you mulligan, and then you draw 7 each time. If I mulligan 10 times, I don't think I can mulligan that much. I think I have to mulligan equal to the amount of cards that I can remove. So I can mulligan 7 times, but every time I mulligan, I still see 7 cards. But if I mulligan to 7, then I have to put all 7 back. So if I mulligan once, I draw 7, put 1 card back. If I mulligan twice, I draw 7, put 2 cards back. Okay, so we're starting to understand that. So let's explore that even further here. Hand 1, kind of same as above, not very keepable. Hand 2, I switched this up a little bit. Okay, so I really don't like this hand because there's a lot of like uncertain elements, right? So you have some mana development, but no real way to play. You don't have like a Lotus Petal and everything. So you don't have a way to play out the Tinderwall, the Cantor to switch into, or the Dark Ritual. You have the Generous End to grab a land, but again, you don't have a free mana to then like get it. And then notably the big thing is it's close. To be fair, I think a lot of people would keep this hand if it wasn't for Dread Return in hand. Unless you have a Songs of the Damned, I would not be keeping like your Lot-Led Giant in hand or your Dread Return in hand. You generally want this milled out. And so even though the street rates can go to the graveyard and then add to your rituals later and your graveyard count and everything, like all of that matters, you don't know what these street rates are converting into. So because the Dread Return's in here, I would mulligan again, right? So now, each and every single one of these times we've seen 7 cards. Hand 3, I still see 7, and I have the perfect 5 card win. As I was highlighting before, all I do is I drop, at this point, I have the perfect 5 card win. So I drop Lotus Petal, I drop Songs of the Damned, right? I then Haunted Mire, I play that tapped, right? The next turn I play Lotus Petal, I go Dark Ritual, Balustrade Spy, 2 mana I then use the 2 remaining black mana after I mill out my deck to return 2 Dregscape zombies, sacrifice those 3 zombies to the Dread Return that's in my graveyard now because I milled out my whole deck, reanimate the Lot-Led Giant, and I win, right? So I have the win in hand. You can now see how for combo decks specifically, every time you improve the mulligan to prevent non-games, it specifically helps the quality decks. There's quantity decks and there's quality decks. The quality decks are largely the combo decks or the ones that want to like specifically come to a certain mass of cards. So for example, something like Tron is a quality deck. You want to achieve natural Tron and you have certain, or not even natural Tron. Of course you want to achieve natural Tron, but you want to achieve one of each Tron land by turn 3 to then start powering out crazy powerful cards. And then when it comes to the fair decks, what it helps them do is find their sideboard cards even better because you're seeing more cards per hand than before in your mulligans. So if you see 7 every time, that just increases the amount of chances that you get to see your Leyline of the Void, your Relic of Progenitus against the graveyard strategies. Whereas before you would mulligan 1 less in the Paris mulligan, right? In the Vancouver mulligan, whatever it might be, you go 1 less every time. Even if you scry was worse, because in a world of ley lines, this was still a time when ley lines were really good. Scrying a ley line at the top, that felt bad. You put it at the bottom, you're in a fetch land format, it just might go back up to the top again. It just didn't feel great. But in a world of ley lines, in a world of sideboard cards, not only do the quality decks get a boost, but the quantity decks that want to assemble a variety of different pieces to come together and provide incremental value to win the game, those are the type of strategies that then can also get value from getting their sideboard cards out. And we know for a while that in Modern specifically, it is a very sideboard driven format. Legacy and Vintage are very much decision making driven formats. A lot of them, the older format, you get the early and earlier those decisions matter. And in Pauper, in many ways, like it is a very grindy format. It's super fast right now, but that's a topic for a whole other video, probably later this week. But this is kind of highlighting the mulligans. So with all that knowledge as to where we're at with the Paris mulligan, how we've evolved, let's look at some of the responses to this tweet and break it down. So first one, someone already said it, but combo decks would be insane. Imagine if your starting hand size was 9 cards. Yo, 1 land spy with 9 cards. Yes, you could say the quality decks would then be mulliganing to 1 mana counter spell. The legacy decks would always have Force of Will in them, right? Like, but there's a give and take. It's an arms race, because then if you're able to see more cards per hand, the other decks are just going to be playing more all-in cards. You can be greedier and greedier because you're going to see more and more and more cards. Let's say you start with hand size of 9, right? What if we, instead of starting with 9 cards in hand, we start with 9 and then we have to go down to 7. So you just get like a quote unquote free mulligan look. You get a sculpt at the beginning. That would still be insane. That would like we're understanding how that would still be insane for the combo decks, right? Because that's the thing that we have to balance for. That's the thing we have to balance for. It's not a problem with the combo decks. It's the combo needs to exist. I hope everyone understands this. Do not delete your comment right now. Delete your comment right now. All of you saying that it's a problem with the combo decks. No. Formats that allow for combos are good formats. They are the amount of options you have in those formats are much better in formats that don't have those combo decks. I'm just putting that out there right now. They are much better formats because they allow for that diversity, the give and take. The decisions that you have to make in deck building in a combo deck are very important and key fundamental skills that you should have as a Magic player, and they're important to exist in every format. We should not be hyper-powering them though with tools that they're able to abuse over other people. It's not just about the cards. It's like the outside of game kind of the outside tools, right? You shouldn't be allowing free mulligans and everything, which is why in CDH, they definitely don't, they operate with the regular mulligan rules. They're not operating with free mulligans like many of you do in your casual pods. This person said, draw 10, keep 7 works in the non-combo format. It is really, really rare to not get a keepable hand with 10-7. Okay. What does nothing against this person. It's the statement. What does non-combo format mean? What does that mean? Vintage, Legacy, Modern, Pauper, Pioneer. Go to Arena, Historic and Timeless. What are the, it's just Standard. What are the non-combo formats that exist in Magic? We're just gonna implement a random mulliganing rule for just Standard. I don't know what this tweet means. I generally don't know what this tweet means. Nikachu comes in here saying, why can't we just have one free mulligan like Commander? No, Nikachu, I love you, but no. The fear is that it'll benefit combo, but it didn't really play out like that with the London mulligan. What? Didn't it though? What do you mean? We naturally have to mulligan so often that I think one free mulligan will give us 7 cards way more often. Okay, no. It did play out like this. And I highlighted this. And to be fair, look, I'm not going to pretend like I got heaps of data and research papers to support what I'm saying. I highlighted a niche hand operating in a niche scenario against a very unique combo deck in a format that doesn't get played by millions of people. I get that. But how does this not benefit combo decks? Like as a modern Storm player, as a modern Living End player, wouldn't you love a free mulligan? Is it one free mulligan? Are you saying that we go free then Paris? Are you saying free and then stop? So it's like a variation of the first London mulligan, the first mulligan that we have, right? Like in general, what I would say is, especially for EDH, I've seen this happen a lot. Like, okay, the very big difference here. If you're playing in your own casual pods in EDH at the kitchen table, I would say go free as much as you want, because the vibes at a kitchen table are like hang out, chill, catch up with your friends. Generally speaking, that's what it's at. So I'm happy with free mulligans there because it is Magic, but it's more so about the gathering. We're enabling the gathering. Still so as much, even at the LGS, I would definitely propose not free mulligans there unless you're close with the group, right? Because you need to know what you're playing against, right? Because then you're going to enable the one person that doesn't know how to power scale properly. They're like, my deck's a 6, but they're playing all these 8 power level cards and they vamp tutor on turn 1. You're like, what do you mean? We just let you free mulligan. You're going to vamp tutor on turn 1? Crazy work. And it's actually happened to me. Crazy work. So that's where I would not have people free mulligan there. But when it comes to constructed cards, you can't give free mulligans to the quality decks. Don't let them get a free look at 7 and then keep it. There's no downside. Folks, you get a free look at 7, right? You get a free look at 7. Imagine you didn't have to pull 1 card back. You just had 7 cards. Right? The Thoughtseize that your opponent has for you is just as valuable. Nothing's changed because you could keep the bad card in hand, but the bad card, actually, to be fair, it could be worse against the Thoughtseize because the card that you now have to make a decision between keeping and thinking, like, you're like, oh, I have a Fatal Push, but then I have like a Go for the Throat. Like I might need the Go for the Throat for the Murktide Regent. Like, and then you're like, okay, you know what? But I can only keep 1 removal spell. Now you get to keep both. You got a free mulligan. We can't. No, free resources like this are a problem in game and outside the game. Free resources like this are a problem unless they're being balanced appropriately, right? Like a lot of people had something to say about my legacy video from last week, kind of harping on Vexing Bauble, and a lot of people like, oh, you know, the free spells aren't, the players are mad the free spells don't work anymore. That's the axis that Vintage and Legacy work off of. You need free spells in those formats or they just become unplayable. A lot of people don't care because they're not invested into Legacy, which is what I'm hoping to change, you know, at least get people's eyes on it, kind of on my end. But I don't think one free mulligan like in Commander makes sense at all. I ultimately don't think this is the solution that we need to the London mulligan that we have right now. I don't even know if it needs to be improved. I don't think there is a need for this. I think a lot of people love the mulligan right now. You get to look at as many cards as you need to and put cards away. There's a lot of decision making involved in that, and there's a lot of control that the player has. You see the same amount of cards that your opponent does, and then it prevents a lot of non-games because yes, your card number 6 and 7 could be the lands that you need to win, and so you then have to lose a card, lose another whatever, to then keep those lands and be able to play the game. I understand that going down to 5 leads to a lot of non-games. That's fair, and that's again what the purpose of this mulligan was to do, was to prevent those non-games, because mulling to 5 was so much worse back then. At the time when LSV's game ultimately led to the change of the mulligan rule, it was so much worse back then. Now it's much better. You get to see more options, and the quality decks have a much better time instead of just losing to their own mulligans. And the quantity decks, the fair decks, can then look to find their sideboard options much more reliably to then win the game with, right? And so I think this is why ultimately this video may have come off as very subjective, but I just don't think there's any problem with this. Right? We just, let's leave the mulligan as it is. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I don't think there needs to be any changes. I think we're all just spinning our wheels a little bit and trying to find something to be mad at. I don't know if this is really a problem we need to be solving. Maybe something changes down the line and my mind, you know, whatever, goes in a different direction. I just don't think we're at some type of big cultural shift in Magic where we need to change the mulligan rule again at all.